New York City rents are at an all-time high? You don't say, no me digas. Obviously, we already know that. But the real question that nobody's asking is how come some of these apartment buildings in New York are sitting on the market for a lot longer and are worth less than they were just a couple years ago? That is the question that we're gonna dive into today. And the real truth has nothing to do with demand and everything to do with what's happening behind the scenes. For those of you who don't know, it's your girl, Lizzztings. I am helping multifamily investors and first-time homebuyers who are relocating to the greatest city in the world help pursue their dreams and make them a reality. So in today's video, we are going to cover why New York City rents are at record highs and some buildings are actually losing value. What are the expense explosions that are hitting landlords right now? That includes insurance, taxes, labor, and more. The property tax inequity that's been hiding in plain sight, and why some smaller landlords in Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx are getting squeezed the hardest. After that, we'll go over what is the data saying about rent-stabilized buildings and how the tenants who depend on them are suffering, and what is all of this meaning if you're planning on buying New York City multifamily today. Let's dive right into it. Starting with what people all think they know the most, which is the rents increasing. Obviously, that's common knowledge. You can look it up online. Rents in New York City have been climbing for years. Median asking rents in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens are all near the top of the historical ranges. And the narrative out there is that the landlords are printing money. And if you look at the revenue outside the ledger, you could understand why people think that. But here's what narrative completely gets wrong. Income is only half the question. A business isn't profitable because revenue went up. It's profitable when revenue grows faster than expenses. And for a huge portion of New York City multifamily housing, that is the second part that's not happening. This week, I was able to experience an amazing panel over at the NYU Furman Center. I was invited by one of my good friends and colleagues to attend this session and hear what is the latest and greatest they found regarding the tax situation here in the city and what are they thinking about doing as far as proposals to mitigate these expenses for our landlords. The NYU Furman Center is one of the most respected housing policy research institutions in the country, and we looked into their annual State of New York City's Housing and Neighborhood Report. And what it found about the property tax burden on multifamily buildings should be front page news, but it isn't. And that's why we are going to dive into it today. So let's talk about what it actually costs to run an apartment building in New York City in 2026 right now. Starting with insurance. Insurance is one of the blindsiders of all owners. According to the Furman Center's data, the insurance costs have rose roughly 150% between 2019 and 2025 for rent-stabilized buildings. Utilities have gone up about 31% over the same period of time in the last 5 years. Maintenance and repairs have risen about 39%, and labor, fuel, and administration all are tracking at or above general inflation. Now here's the math that should hit you. If your rental income grows 3% year over year, and that's conservative for New York. We know that usually it's 4 to 5% in a lot of these buildings. However, your expenses are growing at a 10 to 15 to 20, sometimes even 30% year over year. The math ain't mathin' for me, honey. You're not ahead here, you're falling behind. Every year, the net operating income, or NOI, is shrinking. And when the net operating income shrinks, property values fall, and even rents are going up. On paper, doesn't make a difference when your expenses are increasing that drastically. This is exactly what's happening across a significant portion of New York City's multifamily housing stock. The Furman Center's data shows that for heavily rent-stabilized buildings built before 1974, operating income actually decreased following the 2019 Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, while property taxes have continued to rise. Revenue capped, taxes and expenses rising. That's the squeeze. Make it make sense, honey. Part 3 is where the majority of the Furman Center's report for this year really focused on, which is the tax inequity. And that's what most people are not talking about. This is where the focus was, and we will dive into that right now. The majority of the rest of this video is going to really focus in on that. If you want to take a look at the report yourself, I have dropped the link in the chat. Highly recommend taking a look and seeing some of the graphics they have provided because it's very helpful to follow along. Let's get back into it. So outside of policy circles, we don't hear very many people talking about this, but New York City property tax system divides real estate into 4 different classes. Class 1 is 1 to 3 family homes. Class 2 is essentially everything else residential: condos, co-ops, and rental apartment buildings. And within that system, multifamily rental buildings, the kind of house that the majority of New York City renters, are taxed significantly higher effective rate than owner-occupied properties. So how much higher? According to the Furman Center's report, nearly 6 percentage points higher than an owner-occupied building. Think about what that means in practice. A person who owns a brownstone and lives in it is paying a materially lower effective tax rate on the property than someone who owns a 10-unit rental building down the street. The person who owns a rental building is providing housing to 10 families. They're absorbing all that risk, maintenance, insurance, and financing. They're being taxed at a higher rate. But it gets even more specific. Within a rental building universe, the Furman Center found that the larger rental buildings pay higher effective tax rates than the smaller one. And the higher condos and co-ops are in the same building class, and those larger buildings still pay that higher effective tax rate. So if you own a co-op in an apartment, you're paying less in property tax than a rental building owner with a comparable asset value. Same square footage, same neighborhood, lower tax bill, all because of how you're classified. This isn't a secret. Housing researchers and policymakers have been talking about this for years. But what the Furman Center did in this new report put the numbers together in a way that it's hard to ignore. The system, as it's currently structured, is taxing the buildings at a lower income and working class New Yorkers at a higher rate than building and housing higher income, higher owner-occupied New Yorkers. And almost nobody's talking about this. It was super eye-opening to be a part of this conversation the other day because I honestly didn't know the extent of how differently each class has been taxed in the past, and I loved the options that they gave to maybe change the system for the better. Let's get into part 4. Why do small landlords get hit the hardest? Now let's make this real. We're not talking about Blackstone and related companies. We're talking about your next door neighbor. And a lot of these people are my friends and former clients or even current clients, and that's where it hits hard for me. I want to make sure that I'm able to provide my clients and friends who are investors with the most updated data, but also help them with some solutions to make sure that they're able to continue to run their business like a business that it is, but also be able to afford it. It's not worth it if it's really going to be costing you more and you're not able to improve the building based on the amount of expenses that you have over time. The 6-unit building owner in Jackson Heights who inherited that property from her parents and is trying to keep it afloat, or the guy in the South Bronx who owns 8 units, manages themselves on the weekends, and is watching his insurance bill triple while his rent increases are capped by the RGB. Or a family in Flatbush with 12 apartments, a mortgage they refinanced in 2021, an interest rate that's now eating a significantly bigger piece of the pie. These owners don't have the scale of institutional investors. They can't absorb these costs by spreading them out across 500 different buildings or by renegotiating insurance costs in bulk. And they can't raise capital cheaply. And when the math stops mathing, you're left with a pretty heavy decision. You can defer maintenance. That's really important to most of these buildings to keep them running, especially these pre-war buildings that have been around for centuries. You can sell at a loss, which is what some people are having to do right now, or you can walk away. And none of those options are really positive. And here's the downstream effect that really nobody gets into. When small landlords can't maintain their buildings, the tenants suffer. When small landlords sell under pressure, the buyer is often a larger operator with a very different agenda. The community character of a neighborhood can change quickly. So this is not just an investor problem anymore, it's a housing problem. Let's go into part 5 that talks about the rent stabilization as a whole. So I want to be very careful here. My goal is to be educational, not political, and this can get political very quickly. I'm not trying to take sides, but I do want to present the information to you so you can be informed in your decisions. Here's what the data shows. The Furman Center specifically looked at what they call legacy rent stabilized buildings, buildings where more than 90% of the units are rent stabilized, most of them built before 1974. There are thousands of these buildings across New York City, and they have some of the city's most vulnerable renters. The median collected rent in these buildings is around $13.95 per month as of 2025. That's roughly affordable to a household earning about 40% of the area median income. These are genuinely affordable apartments, housing people who would have nowhere to go if these buildings became financially inviable. And yet, the Furman Center's data shows that the property taxes on these buildings, the buildings serving the most financially vulnerable tenants, rose faster than inflation between 2019 and 2025, while operating income declined. One housing researcher described the current system this way: it overtaxes the building's housing at the lowest income people while giving tax exemptions to buildings with the richest renters. I'll let that sit. So clearly this is a complicated issue. How you reform the system and how you make sure that you're being equitable to the renters in place currently, it's complicated. And reasonable people disagree, but you can't fix what you won't acknowledge. Right now, people don't even know a lot of this is happening. Let's get into part 6. What does this mean for a buyer investor? So if you're looking to buy in New York City, by the way, your girl Lizzztings got you. I am working with multifamily investors on the regular, making calls every single day to help you get what you need and get your goals achieved. It's not easy. You need to be open-minded and adaptable, but I'd love to have that conversation with you. My number's in the DMs, and you can find me on Instagram. I'd be happy to schedule a call with you and keep our focus in mind. Let's get back into it. So what can we actually do with all this information? Number 1, deals are not dead, but you do need to underwrite very smart and very strategically. What do I mean by underwrite? The era of buying a multifamily in New York City based on current rent rolls and assuming the costs stay flat is over. You need to stress test your expenses and your assumptions. Looking at insurance costs from comparable buildings in that zip code, understanding what property tax class falls into, and don't assume that those taxes are going to stay flat, because they haven't, and there's no reason to think that they change without significant policy reform. Okay, secondly, we need to be on the lookout for those rent stabilized buildings and the mix of rent stabilized units within a building. This goes without saying for the majority of long-term savvy investors here, but I want to make it very clear and transparent for people who are new to the market. A lot of times I get buyers who call me and say, oh my gosh, Liz, this multifamily is 6 units. It's under $1 million in Astoria, which is one of the hottest neighborhoods in Queens. And if you think about that, does that make sense? No, the math ain't mathing, because the majority of those buildings that look like that are rent stabilized by 90% or more, and you're not going to be getting anywhere near the income that you need in order to operate that building with the expenses that are coming in. A building with 90% rent stabilized units is fundamentally different investment than a market rate building, and the revenue ceiling is real. The expense exposure is real. So you need to make sure you're looking at both sides realistically and honestly without optimism in mind. Thirdly, we're going to look at location, but maybe not more than ever. In a squeezed environment, you want assets where underlying demand is durable. Neighborhoods with quality of life fundamentals, good transit, and limited housing supply will hold values over those marginal locations. Okay, and lastly, this may be a contrarian take, but there's quite a bit of opportunity here. If small landlords are under pressure, the math has stopped working for those owners who aren't sophisticated operators. They've owned this property for years and generations. Maybe it was a family-owned property and the parents have passed away, and now the children of the next generation are running the building and they have no idea how to do so. This is where the opportunity lies. Those distressed assets will come to the market. The question is whether you have the underwriting discipline to buy them at the prices that actually work and the operational capability to run them. So the crisis in this headline is real, but crisis creates entry points for people who are ready to take that risk. And when I say take that risk, you have to be prepared. It's not going to be an easy feat, but that's why you get a team like mine to help you out with this along the way. If this video provided you any value as far as a little bit more insight into the New York City market, I would love it if you could hit the like, subscribe, and always an option to book a call with me. I also left my phone number in the description as well. So if you would like to have a call conversation, text me, hit me up. I'm available to help you out. This is a topic that obviously is making the headlines, but the details are still very nuanced and it's very complicated and it's not going to happen overnight. But the more that we get the information out to the general public, the better equipped we will be when the time comes that we're able to actually make some legitimate change. Definitely would love to help you out if you're interested in still taking a look at what's available here. You want to take that risk, get into this market. What a market to be in, and what a time to be alive in the greatest city in the world. I'll catch you next time. It's your Lizzztings signing out.